What's up, everybody? Welcome to FoundFlix. Your favorite confusingly moralistic killer Jigsaw is back in the 10th entry of the long-running Saw series in the appropriately titled Saw 10. We'll be breaking down John Kramer's latest game, including the many twists and turns and everything you need to know about Saw 10. As the Saw series wore on, it became more and more defined by its increasingly convoluted timeline, as well as, of course, its signature traps of torture, which also got more ridiculous over time, especially by the later chapters. Now, obviously, the biggest mistake the entire series made was killing John Kramer all the way back in Saw 3, his cohort Amanda as well, ever since the filmmakers have attempted any way they can to somehow keep John relevant to the story even after his death. Yet he was always shoehorned in the sidelines in some kind of hackneyed out of left field sort of way. Fortunately, the creators behind Saw 10 figured out a clever workaround for this problem by making Saw 10 a prequel set between the events of Saw 1 and Saw 2. What makes it so successful is that we finally have John front and center in a very personal story, and this actually feels like a real movie, you know what I mean? Not just random human meat thrown together to be torn to shreds violently by strange machines. I have to say I was shocked to discover that Saw 10 turned out to possibly be the best entry in the entire series. That's right, 10th time's a charm, I guess. So let's check out Saw 10, breaking down the story's many twists, how it fits into the series as a whole, as well as explaining the ending and credit scene that fills in some interesting gaps in the timeline. We meet back up with John a mere few weeks after the events of Saw 1, and already his health is quickly deteriorating thanks to the tumor in his brain. He's first seen going through some intensive tests and inquires hopefully to the lady administering them for the results, but she lets him down that she's just a technician. The actual doctor isn't much more promising, suggesting for him to simply retire and take it easy for the rest of his days. An easy death, John scoffs. That's not how he does things, especially after his diagnosis spurned his whole Jigsaw thing in the first place. Even now, when not playing one of his twisted games, John's mind can't help but wander to his craft and oddly moralistic stance. A young man tending with a laid-out patient seizes the chance to rummage through his belongings and grabs hold of his gold wedding band, all seen by John's watchful eye. Inspired by the patient, whose fingers are ensnared in long wires, John daydreams of a brutal trap to test the boy's resolve. He's placed in his own similar finger traps, along with an alarming series of tubes on goggles attached to his eyes. A staticky recording informs him of the rules here. All he has to do to save his eyes is press a dial all the way from 1 to 5. Not so hard, right? Of course, he doesn't mention that turning the dial will painfully break one of his fingers along the way. He makes it through the first 4 with great pain, and yet with only one finger left to break, the kid totally freaks out and spits that he can't do it anymore. Time comes to 0, and a vacuum starts gaining suction. As it reaches full power, his eyes are zooped right out through the tubes. Come on, what's worse, one more broken finger or no eyeballs? You tell me. At least in real life, the orderly ultimately decides not to steal the ring, which John commends him on. Good choice, he scowls as the boy passes by. Desperate for any kind of solace, John attends group therapy sessions with others in a similar boat to himself. One man, Henry, shares his personal story involving stage 4 pancreatic cancer. There's seemingly nothing that can be done. After some time, John's situation is looking more dire than ever, and he preoccupies himself with a sketchbook dreaming up various murder traps. Gotta keep the mind spry. Things take a turn when he has a chance encounter with Henry, who is looking much better. John calls him over to find out the scoop, and Henry spills about a radical procedure that he had done involving a special drug cocktail along with surgery. It worked like a charm, and impressively, his cancer is fully in remission. John is intrigued by this miracle cure, and Henry explains that the particular medical crew is frequently on the move. He hasn't heard from them since his treatment was done in Norway. He does have a trail to lead him down at least, giving him a link for the Finn Peterson Institute. John searches into the doctor, and based on an interview he does sound legit, he checks out the link and is greeted by a video message from the doctor's daughter, Cecilia. According to her, due to the radical nature of her father's work, which has drawn concern from Big Pharma, he has gone into hiding. So she is acting in his place to continue his breakthrough treatment on anyone that she can. She just wants to help the people. Totally selfless. Sure, it costs a shit ton of cash too, but don't worry about that. It's not about the money. It's never about the money. He leaves his contact info on the site and is awoken later to a call from Cecilia herself to his surprise. She is happy to let him know that they are able to take his case and are confident that he will be completely cured. She offers him a place in a trial occurring in 3 months from now, but due to John's silence, she realizes that he doesn't have that much time. Conveniently, there's another round coming up the very next week and thinks that she can squeeze him in, leaving John hopeful that he can actually escape his fate. We already know differently. As they are currently operating operating incognito in Mexico, John travels down there for the operation. A chatty cabbie Diego, provided by the clinic, fills him in on local tourist sites as they pass by, like one featuring statues of priests who would behead their subjects. Neat! He takes him out to a more rural area, and surprisingly a van pulls up loaded with armed men. Woo, welcome to Mexico, I guess. With a gun up in his face, they ask John his name, to which he calmly responds. This is all just a precaution as well, and the men load him into a van under the guise of keeping their location a secret. They take him to a remote facility and drop him off right at the front door. A kind young girl, Gabriella, who says she lives at the house, is there to greet him and shows him his quarters. He then gets to meet Cecilia in the flesh, and she details the specifics of his upcoming treatment. Basically, surgery to remove the tumor, combined with her pop's magical mystery potion, and boom, cancer cured. Easy peasy. She is curious what he does for a living, and John says that he was a civil engineer and architect for most of his life, but in retirement he has found some new hobbies. Helping people find themselves, he teases. Like a life coach, she asks. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's what he does. Life coach. She takes him to check out the facilities, a fairly impressive construction nestled in a former chemical warehouse. There he also meets a highly pedigreed associate of her father's, Mateo, rattling off the prestigious hospitals where he's worked. He's then escorted to the surgery room. Sure, walk right on in, no need for sterilization or anything. Another patient, Parker, is there, and has just gone through his own treatment, showing off a bandage on his neck. He's sent on his way, and Valentina is there to lead him through some more important tests before tomorrow. Unable to sleep, John is awoken by a banging outside. He comes to a boy, Carlos, attempting to fix his bike tire, and John warmly lends a hand. Through the language barrier, he asks the Spanish word for push and uses a vise to push his rim back into place. Good as new. Really seeing a very different side to John here. He's kind of a nice guy. Unless, of course, you dick him over in any way whatsoever. Everything seems set up for success, and he's prepped for surgery. As for who is doing the procedure, Cecilia boasts of the doctor. He's the best around. So good, in fact, she'd trust her own family to him. They also will be doing a waking surgery, meaning that at points John will be conscious to make sure they don't mess up his brain too bad. The procedure begins, and he can even see on a monitor them poking around all up in his brain matter. I'm not sure I'd want to see that either. You know, that's my brain right now? What the fuck? Get that out of there. Just let me know when you're done with the surgery, okay? John comes to in another location, and Cecilia declares the procedure was a success. He's glad and also makes mention of transferring her the other half of the cash, a whopping $250K in total. Their seemingly odd change to a new recovery location was due to those folks at that pesky big pharma always on their tails, so they had to leave already to avoid getting caught. John wants to know what he's supposed to do now. He's just gotta lay low here for a week taking doses of those cocktails, and then he's back to start his new life. He recovers, and feeling grateful to those that helped him, including Gabriella, he wants to send her a thank you card as well as some tequila. However, he doesn't know exactly where the house is located. Utilizing his skills, he takes landmarks and triangulates the positioning, and manages to track the house down. When he gets there, he's shocked to find the place completely empty, and it even looks like it has been ransacked with stuff strewn all over the place. He returns to the surgery area, and something catches his eye. A DVD for modern medicinal surgeries. John flips it on, and the footage exactly matches what he saw during his treatment, indicating things are not what they seem here. He then removes his bandage and sees that no incision of any kind was made. The entire thing was a total farce and scam. John can't believe that he was duped, and his mind reels at the revelation. What really sets John off is that he recognizes the doctor's face as none other than the cabbie Diego. They couldn't even get a different guy to play the doctor. Pretty lazy scam going around here. They didn't even hide their medical surgery DVD, for God's sakes. Should we put that away? Nah, it's fine. They won't even notice. John places a call to a mysterious detective, more on that later, who is able to quickly find the lad. So John puts Diego through his own game, wrapping his hands in mounds of tape with scalpels protruding from the ends. Oh, and he's implanted some bombs into both of his arms. The trick is, the scalpels are strong enough to cut through his flesh and bone, but unfortunately not the steel wires. Something you pretty much just gotta hacksaw your arms to bits to get the bombs off in 3 minutes. I actually really like the setup of this one because of how personal it is. There's no real theatrics, well, beyond the bomb arms, just John on the other side of the glass watching his subject beg and plead with cold indifference. Diego figures out pretty quickly he has no choice but to play the game, and gets to work slicing the hell out of his forearms. He gets one bomb free, and turns to the other, time running out. He tears the other off just in time, tossing it away before a huge explosion goes off. So he did survive his game, and John is impressed, getting him quickly to emergency services, promising that he will live. I mean, your arms are probably gonna be fucked up forever, but good job regardless. At least I didn't let you explode. You're welcome. Clues from Diego lead him and his pig mask associate to track down the others from the cast of the faux medical facility, learning that they were mostly merely playing parts. Valentina is actually a prostitute, apparently. Diego works overnights at a vet clinic where he begrudgingly provides Gabriella with drugs. Not exactly the wonderkins of medicine that Cecilia touted. Cecilia proves to be the most difficult to deal with, all alone in her massive mansion covered in security cameras. There's a corkboard up on the wall with photos of various patients along with the exorbitant amounts of cash they paid for lies. She comes to John's photo and tosses it glibly in the trash. Thanks for the money, chump. The pig mask figure smashes in through the ceiling and stalks Cecilia through the house. She manages to get down to her car, but another pig figure is waiting there and knocks her out. They remove their mask, seeing that it's John. Well then, who is the other person? It's his old pal Amanda, of course. Well, kind of his new pal at this point, actually, as we are seeing them in a slightly earlier point in their relationship before Saw 2 and 3. So again, between Saw 1 and 2. She's a fresh acolyte at this point, but still totally committed to John's cause. That is, until she starts kind of doubting the whole flawed moral system at play in his games. John rounds everyone up back at the same side of his surgery, and it's time for a new game to begin. John and Amanda confront the others about their diabolical scheme. They're trying to take advantage of people and give them false hope. The others attempt to argue that they were just doing what Cecilia wanted, but John counters that they still were paid and were part of the whole setup of tricking dying people. Still bad enough for a test according to John's flimsy book of morals. Cecilia maintains her facade most of all, insisting that they are doing something good here and really helping people, making no admission whatsoever of it truly being a big fat money-making fraud. See, she's a bad guy too, that's the whole point here. But still, even if she did defraud those people, is more or less killing her really justified? Well, Jigsaw says so, because I guess sure you can survive a lot of the traps, but it ain't gonna be easy. The first up to play is Valentina, whose head is trapped in between thick wires. In order to avoid getting decapitated, probably a good thing, she has to use a medical saw to remove her entire leg. Don't worry, it's designed to cut through bone and stuff. After you saw your damn leg off, you have to provide a sample of bone marrow of enough weight into a machine to unlock the wires. No big deal, right? Valentina is initially unable to act, just completely losing her mind at the idea of what she even has to do here. Cecilia and the others urge her on, and she makes a preliminary small cut with the saw. That's already pushed Valentina to her limits, but after a few moments tick by, she dutifully continues seesawing back and forth on her whole leg like a giant ham hock. She does get the gam off, but still has to jam a rod right into the stump for the sample. Yeesh. It starts to collect into the contraption, but time runs out first, and the wires cut her head clean off, rolling across the floor to everyone's horror. They're like, man, this Kramer guy is pretty serious, y'all. On their own, the killers discuss the specifics of their latest subjects, and Amanda is feeling sympathy towards Gabriella. She is just a kid after all, but as it goes by John's rules, she's just as guilty as the others, and will have to face her fate as well. This doesn't sit well with Amanda, harkening back to similar conversations in the first trilogy. Their captives notice that the duo aren't watching, and take advantage of the moment. Cecilia's phone is on a table not too far out of reach. All they need is a rope of some kind to wrangle around the gurney to bring it closer. With no rope around, Cecilia gets a little creative. She jams a sharp object into Valentina's corpse and extracts her intestines. There, got your rope! They all work in tandem to get the intestines in place and roll the gurney over to Cecilia. She manages to briefly connect on a call, explaining at least that they've been kidnapped, before Amanda sucks her lights out and takes the phone. They soon set out to prep the next player, and Amanda is still sympathetic towards Gabby, also possibly due to relating on the drug thing, and insists that Mateo should go next. Down on the floor, Gabby complains about Amanda not helping her, but she points out that she already has. It's only thanks to her that she's not playing now. She better make sure to follow John's rules or things could get real bad. Things then take an unexpected turn when Amanda notices someone approaching on the monitors. It's Peter, the patient from earlier, who has apparently figured out that he was duped as well. He says he's here to air his grievances and get his money back, wielding a gun. Amanda sets up a decoy pig figure for him and uses it to trick him and takes him captive. He's then reunited with John and introduced to their whole twisted game on display. It's justified because they dicked you over too, you know? They're not exactly sure how he'll react just yet, so to be safe, they chain him up to a chair to watch things unfold as it's Mateo's turn to play. His test involves a kind of parallel to John's own fake brain surgery. Billy makes an appearance, rolling out the various appliances to utilize, along with a cassette tape. On the tape, John explains that he must cut open his skull and extract enough brain matter to trigger another device to create create a key to free himself. Otherwise, the weird coil mask thing that he's in will fry him up good. The 3-minute clock is set, and Mateo, most of any player so far, is just totally unwilling to go along with the game. He just keeps screaming and saying that he wants out of here, and I'm like, you're wasting your time, dude. Start cutting your damn skull open. He finally relents to the sadistic ritual and directs the cutting machine at his cranium. He carves it open and starts digging around in there with tweezers, really tugging on the gray stuff. Whew, geez, be careful, dude. He gets a fair chunk out and dunks it into the solution, the enzyme slowly being broken down. Which I have to say is another totally unfair thing. I already gave you a piece of my brain, now I gotta wait for your solution to dissolve it, to make a key and shit and another device thingy. Come on now. This convoluted process unsurprisingly proves his downfall and time runs out. The coils start glowing red and then clamp over his face, creating a traditional Mexican mask and toasting him to death. Well, proves the point, don't waste time. Peter is disgusted by the killer's actions, deeming them sick, but they are unwavered and still believe that they are ultimately in the right here. There's no avoiding that it's Gabriella's turn, obviously saving the biggest perpetrator for last. A tape drops down and she sheepishly starts it, only to throw it away in terror. John reminds her that avoiding it isn't gonna really help anything, and a series of winches are activated, which lift her high into the air, one chain on her leg and one on her hand. Since she refused to play the tape, John lays out her predicament for her instead. Expressing the dangers of radiation machines, a large heater looms in front of her. To survive, she'll have to break both of her limbs to escape the chains and avoid getting burned alive. Her time is set, and the heater whirs to life, already singeing her skin. She retrieves a blunt object left for her, and Cecilia gives her a helpful tip. Do your leg first, that way you can swing out of the way of the death dryer, otherwise you're gonna go flying all over the place. The heater grows in intensity as she bashes at her ankle repeatedly. It is finally let loose, and she does swing out of the heater's radius. But, as he said, you gotta do your hand too, and the heater robotically moves right in place to torture her once more. She hammers frantically at her hand, her skin getting increasingly sizzled, and she manages to break free from her restraints, plummeting to the ground. Alive, but, barely. After the display, John allows Parker to be set free, and he immediately turns on them, going for his stashed gun. For a brief moment, you're going, is he doing this because he thinks they're nuts, or was he in on the whole thing with the facility from the get-go? This is made quite clear when he escorts John and Amanda downstairs at gunpoint, and Cecilia makes a face something like this. Immediately you're like, oh, they're together, must have been who she called earlier too. Parker orders him to let Cecilia free and puts Kramer in her place. That doesn't feel so good the other way around, huh? Cecilia really leans into her villainous nature now that she has him apparently at a disadvantage, putting him down for his disturbed ideals. She even clocks him as the one and only Jigsaw. Knowing this, she actually finds herself strangely disappointed. She really thought at first that she was for sure doomed, but now sees him as just another easy mark. To really stress the evil angle here, John points out that Gabby needs to get to a hospital immediately. Uncaring, Cecilia unleashes her heels upon Gabby's neck, snapping it like a twig and killing her. She has no remorse there at all, and even thanks John for killing the others. Just one last person to share her cut with. Almost sounding like John herself, she doesn't want him to just die for what he's put her through. She wants him to suffer, and wants to force him to see an innocent life lost before his own. There's a perfect specimen nearby in little Carlos, naively bouncing a soccer ball on the building. Cecilia lures him inside, and she decides it's time for them to play a game. Both are bound around the neck with chains, and out of compassion, they both refuse to start the trap. Parker pulls the lever for them, and the chains get tight, flinging both down on the metallic surface, which lifts upwards. A supply of blood is dumped down upon them, effectively torturing them with a deluge of red stuff. Showing that same weirdly compassionate side to himself from earlier, John keeps taking the blood rather than allowing Carlos to take any. Carlos didn't do anything wrong, so he definitely doesn't deserve to die. Feeling satisfied with this outcome, the couple refocus on getting all that cash that John reclaimed from her, which he revealed earlier was stashed upstairs. In the office, Peter does some thinking about things and is a bit confused. If John had intended for Cecilia to be the last player, then why the heck was the seesaw designed for two? Well, because you boners got played Jigsaw style. They reach for a duffel bag nearby, triggering a 10-minute timer, and the door slams shut, trapping them in the room. A toxic gas starts pumping in, and John explains their game set up from a bit ago. After taking the phone, Amanda tracked who Cecilia called, and thusly they adjusted their game accordingly. Knowing that Cecilia would turn on anyone to serve her own interest, in this game there can be only one survivor. They have no choice but to kill each other, so the victor can stick their head in the one vent here that allows them to not breathe the poison and die. Cecilia really shows her vicious nature right off the bat, brutally murdering the guy that saved her in the first place so she can live. Thanks. She then pokes her head out, seeing that John and the others have all unshackled themselves. It was all just a show to set up her game. She begs for help, but the point is she must save herself, and in a way finally face who she is at her core, an awful, awful, evil person. John Carlos and Amanda step out into the blistering early morning, and he croaks that it's time to get the boy home. Back in the facility, the clock reaches 0, and the toxic gas recedes, meaning that Cecilia must have survived. Just worth pointing out, she could come back. So for the most part, all the clinic baddies were tended with, but the whole time I was going, what about Henry, the guy from the beginning? He must have been put in place by Cecilia to lure more people and obviously money in. We see as much in the mid-credit scene, as he gets his just dues. Henry awakens in a strange room attached to a spider claw-like device aimed at his belly. Kramer pops out, alerting him of his grievances, and another surprise assistant is there to lend a hand. Hoffman! Of course, we know Detective Hoffman became the later Jigsaw in place of John after his death, and we knew that they had been working together for a while in the others of the series. But this little scene lets us know the relationship started even earlier than expected. And obviously he was the detective friend that was called earlier to help him find and track down Diego. To kind of try and tie the story together to the earlier entries, the pair first encounter each other when Hoffman was seeking his own brand of justice in Saw 4. The detective showed that he was willing to bend the law to get the conclusion that he felt was justice, and this at one pivotal point really hit home. In Saw 5, we saw that his sister was murdered by her ex-boyfriend, but the killer was let off due to a technicality. It wasn't until a few years later that he found himself on the Jigsaw case, which gave him an idea. He could take out Seth and basically frame Jigsaw for it. The problem is, he didn't actually give Seth a chance to escape, he just pretty much wanted to get away with killing him, and that doesn't fit in with Jigsaw's codes. This drew the attention of Jigsaw himself, which begins their relationship. It's actually cool how they tied things together here, and I really feel like Saw 10 is the rare prequel that actually added something important to the timeline, but it also actually enhances the entire series story. Let's see if they can do it again in the inevitable Saw 11. That'll do it for this Any Explain on Saw 10, but don't forget, before we go, you can send me requests for any movies or TV shows you'd like to see me explain by sending them my way on any of my social media accounts at FoundFlix. What did you think of Saw 10 and its ending? Where do you rank it in the series? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Thanks for watching FoundFlix. See you next time.